Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And to the papers as usual, Jeremy Corbyn thinks the press are entirely against him. But actually, if you look at today's paper, it's a varied picture. Some people attack him for his policies, some people attack him for his clothes, some people attack him for his friends, and one newspaper attacks him because his great-grandfather ran a workhouse. So I can't think why he's against that. There's the Sunday Telegraph, Corbyn's shame over the Queen's slur. That's a poem run by Stop the War Coalition. There's the Mail on Sunday, about his former lover, Diane Abbott. Get out of town, that's what she said to his former wife. It may be what the paper is saying to him as well. The Independent Sunday, rather more friendly. Corbyn, my plan for the People's Railway. And the Sunday Times, finally, Corbyn hit by mutiny on airstrikes. A rather more substantial story there, I suspect, on the Corbyn story. And to both of you, thank you very much, Julia and Damien. Both, we're going to have a lot to talk about on the Corbyn stories. Let's start with you, Julia. It is a kind of pretty unending stream of anti-Corbyn commentary, one way and another.
Yes. Yes, I mean, you can feel editors sort of rubbing their hands with glee, can't you? But interestingly, Peter Hitchens, who in his column in the Mail on Sunday, he actually says, I loathe and despise most of what Jeremy Corbyn stands for. However, I'll read out the first opening paragraph of his column because it's quite a surprise. We say we want politicians who are open and honest, and then, when we get one, we angrily pelt him with slime until he cringes to the mob, starts hiding his real views and hires a spin doctor just like all the others. So don't let me hear you complaining again that our leaders are too smooth and obsessed with their images.
A very good start.
A very good start.
Yeah.
And this is the issues that we do always say, don't we, that we want to have politicians. Oh, we want someone who's real. Well, he's as real as they get. He's not been prepared in the past to ever compromise any of his views.
He doesn't drop his top button.
Even at the Remembrance Service and National Anthem, yes. And then when he does, people say, oh no, you have to do things. You have to act like a prime minister in waiting. You have to do certain things. We do need to make our minds up. Do we want someone who is honest and sticks to their beliefs, or someone who just does what other people want?
But there are substantial attacks in today's papers as well, aren't there, Damien? I mean, the Sunday Times there, airstrikes, this is a big issue coming up to the House of Commons soon, and you've got the Mail on Sunday there, which has a big interview with Sadiq Khan, who's going to be Labour's mayoral candidate.
Yes, we've not only got signs of rebellion from Labour MPs on airstrikes, but here you've got Sadiq Khan criticising Jeremy Corbyn over not singing the national anthem, over his policy on taxes, which he calls ridiculous, and over his refusal to join the Privy Council, or at least his resistance to that. And the fact
to be fair, he's not wanting to kneel before the Queen. As an elected politician saying he doesn't want to kneel before an unelected monarch, I'm with him on that.
Well, yeah, exactly. But this is Labour's mayoral candidate saying how proud he was to bend down and kiss the Queen's hand. You know, actually making a virtue of the fact that he did that. And so, you know, for Jeremy Corbyn to read this and think this is one of the MPs that nominated him for the leadership and is turning on him in this sort of
to be a very, very bumpy ride, isn't it?
And doing this in the Mail on Sunday, you know, one of the papers that Jeremy Corbyn will refuse to engage with.
Yeah, but then bearing in mind that Sadiq Khan's sort of the membership that he's looking at, or the voters he's looking at in London, are perhaps rather less forgiving than Corbyn's wider electorate, aren't they? Because there'll be a lot of people who are high earners, who are expecting to, you know, a Labour mayor who will act for everybody, not just people at the very bottom of the pile.
Julia, let me take you to the Sunday Times splash there. This is something that's coming up imminently. Airstrikes on Syria, pro or anti. David Cameron is likely to take this to the House of Commons. And we'll be watching very carefully what happens.
Well, yes, but forget all the fluff about ties and poppies and the like, because this is the real solid stuff of being a political leader. Yes, Corbyn hit by mutiny on airstrikes is the Sunday Times splash headline. Half of the shadow cabinet, apparently, you can probably predict who they would be, are willing to back action in Syria, bombing of Syria, if David Cameron does finally, as we expect in the next month, take it to a vote. Now, that will be a very, very difficult time for the shadow cabinet. You could argue it's a vote of conscience, but this is the sort of thing that most other Labour leaders would not find to be a complicated, thing to actually get agreement on.
And this is the big dilemma for Corbyn, because if he appeases his own shadow cabinet, he then alienates the 200,000 people that voted for him.
Exactly. And he has been very eloquent against airstrikes, saying it'll make things worse. We don't really know who we're backing. It's just going to kill people. And he's very clear about that. And the people who, as you say, who stormed in his support, marched and went to all those rallies and stuff, all agree with him on this. So it's very difficult.
And this is going to be a real litmus test for political leadership. You know, is he going to allow people to be rebels? Is he going to have a three-line whip on this vote? Is it going to be a free vote? Are we going to actually see sort of leadership from Jeremy Corbyn, or is he going to crowdsource it and get people to send emails in?
Exactly. It's been said again and again in the press, Damien, that there's never been a Labour leader like Jeremy Corbyn. But that is not true, is it? Keir Hardie, in many ways, pacifist, infuriated the royal family right at the beginning of the Labour Party story, and then Lansbury in the 30s was against rearmament.
And Simon Danczuk, Labour MP for Rochdale, makes this point in his article in the Mail on Sunday. He says he's not going to defect, but he says defection threats are real. And he makes the point that George Lansbury was elected in 1932 on a pacifist ticket, wanted to abolish the army. 3 years later, he was ousted by Clem Attlee. And, you know, that's clearly what Danczuk is aiming at here, is that let's have this experiment with Jeremy Corbyn, but get rid of him in 3 years.
Now, a lot of people say that the guy really behind all of this, the brains behind the new operation, if you like, is the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. And there's a very interesting interview with him, quite an impressive interview with him in The Observer.
Well, yes, the headline, it was a difficult appointment to make for both Jeremy and me. We knew we were both going to be hit by a tsunami, says John McDonnell. Yes, he's described as a left-wing firebrand. I mean, that's even by The Observer, that's saying something. It is interesting. He's very much trying to come across as cuddly and nice and trustworthy and safe, as he did during his Question Time appearance on Thursday, in which he gave 2 apologies, both of which have turned out to be complete and utter bunkum. And I think this is where he's going to fall down. It's not necessarily on his political views and economic views, although those are questionable in my view and will be for most of the British electorate. It's the fact that the lack of scrutiny that he's been under. John McDonnell is someone who's utterly unheard of by most of the population, most of the voters. And no one has ever scrutinised what he, you make a statement, does it stand up to what you've previously said, does it stand up to the facts? And a lot of these people on the left, and Jeremy Corbyn until the Labour leadership was in this position as well, have never been scrutinised, never been questioned, never been taken up on what they said. They've preached to the converted for years and years and years. And now they are facing people are saying, what are you talking about?
So both John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn are in a slightly vulnerable position at the moment, Damien. Presumably what they want to do is to buy enough time to change the Labour Party in the direction of their leadership success. In other words, to mobilise all these £3 voters, bring them into the Labour Party, and then change it on policy over time. That'll take a year or so.
Yeah, and it's almost maintaining the campaign. Rather than sort of going into leader mode, he's staying in campaign mode and sort of continuing to try and mobilise that group. But what's interesting is John McDonnell's given this interview to The Observer, and then there's the first official bit of spin out of the Corbyn team. It's a briefing, an official briefing to The Independent on Sunday, which is their splash, which is that he wants to introduce the People's Railway, renationalise the railways, as we heard in the news earlier.
Quite a popular policy, I'd imagine.
Yeah, indeed. And we've got a poll in The Sun.
You've got an article in The Sun
I've got an article in The Sun as well.
Just happens to be on the same page.
Happens to be on the same page. But we've got a poll in The Sun where there was 57% support, public support, for that policy of renationalising the railways in the key marginal constituencies Labour needs to win. And here's the good news for Jeremy Corbyn. There is some good news in the paper for him today. In this poll by David Wooding, it says in those 20 Tory seats, Labour would win in 17 of them if an election was held today. So that's good news.
Listening to this, a lot of people would say, Damien McBride, he must go back into the Jeremy Corbyn camp as a leading spin doctor. Have you been asked?
Jeremy Corbyn doesn't deserve that.
Are you tempted?
I would be tempted if he could be tempted, but I think my advice after the John McDonnell controversial appointment would be that's one controversial appointment too many. So I don't think he needs another one.
Okay.
What I think is fascinating about this poll, though, is that yesterday a poll was showing that it wasn't a Corbyn bounce. So
let's move on to the another opposition party, because there's the SNP of the second one, but the Liberal Democrats have their conference at the moment. Tim Farron's first outing as Lib Dem leader in front of his troops.
Well, we've kind of almost forgotten about the Liberal Democrats. They also had a leadership contest, although much quicker, and obviously they were only 8 MPs. It was a rather quicker affair. Yes, leave Fantasyland and join us, Farron tells Labour MPs. And it's absolutely fascinating because the story above it is actually not of a story of a Labour MP defecting to the Liberal Democrats, but actually top Lib Dem, as she's described. I think this is questionable. Jenny Tong.
Jenny Tong has been around for Lib Dems for a very, very long time. She's well known in the party. And she wants to go to the Labour Party because she thinks Corbyn is more honest.
Exactly, so appealing to the left. And of course, we've always had that sort of dichotomy in the Liberal Democrats of appealing to the left and right, which is why things went so horribly wrong for them after joining the coalition, where they lost so many members. But I would have thought, actually, that pretty much anybody who was going to defect by now had already defected. And let's be honest, the Liberal Democrats is hardly a political force now after what happened in May. So a lot of them, I would say the right-wing Labour MPs are actually in a no man's land.
And elsewhere, we've got Vince Cable saying there should be a new party on the centre-left and so forth. The big question, Damon, is there going to be a split in the Labour Party, a row inside the Labour Party? Are people going to try and peel off to the right? What's going to happen? And John Prescott is in characteristically fiery form in the Sunday Mirror.
Yes, he is. I mean, John Prescott has been very, very loyal to Corbyn since he was elected, and he's coined this term, the Bitterites, to describe those that, sounds very similar to Blairites, funnily enough. But the Bitterites, which he uses to characterise those that are unreconciled to the leadership and won't accept the mandate that Jeremy Corbyn's been given. And I think the interesting question when we talk about will there be a Labour split is what's the issue? And, could it be something like Syria? Or could it be something like Trident that is the cause?
And it's got to be something serious, hasn't it? Otherwise... yeah.
Julia, if it hadn't been for the Jeremy Corbyn phenomenon, the papers would be full of stories about the migrant crisis. Liberal Democrats in sunshine are in Bournemouth this week for their annual conference. No jokes about fitting into a phone box, because despite having only 8 MPs, the party says it signed up 20,000 new grassroots members since the general election wipeout. What's more, the new Lib Dem leader Tim Farron claims he's acting as an agony uncle, surely, to distressed Labour politicians following Jeremy Corbyn's victory. Can this really be true? Mr Farron joins us now from the conference centre. Good morning to you, agony uncle.
Morning, Andrew.
Now, I have to say that when you put this to Labour MPs, there is kind of hoots of derision. They don't believe that many Labour MPs have been in touch with you. Can I ask you how many have actually contacted you directly?
Oh, you can ask, and it's a number, but I think it would be unfair to them to go any further into
Below
that.
2?
What does matter, I think, is... No, more than that. What I think is important is that the developments over the last couple of weeks mean that there is now only one party in British politics that believes in social justice and economic credibility, and that is the Liberal Democrats. And against all the odds, after what was a difficult election for us in May, to say the least, we have a situation where we are more relevant than perhaps anybody would have predicted. And we're here in Bournemouth in beautiful weather and in surprisingly good form. We've got 20,000 new members, which is an increase in about a third of our membership. We're the party that's gained most council seats in by-elections since May. That's 11 across the whole of the country. As I say, the change in the tectonic plates of British politics in the last week or two mean that we matter more than we ever have.
I'm sorry, but it appears that you no longer have Jenny Tong.
It's a good question. I spoke to Jenny Tong last night. She's not a member of the Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords, so she sits as an independent. So insofar as I own anybody, she's not ours to start off with.
I see. But she regards Jeremy Corbyn as more honest than your party.
I'm only half hearing you, so you're saying that...
She regards Jeremy Corbyn as more honest than you lot.
Well, she takes a view on Israel-Palestine, which she's entitled to take. I believe in a two-state solution. I also believe that you don't get there by backing extremists who support violence. So it's very important, if we're going to ever solve that incredibly important problem in the Middle East, you don't do it by making out one side is the lone transgressor. And you've got to make sure we have a solution which is going to work and means that two-state solution must come to pass. Netanyahu mustn't be allowed to stop that. Neither should others who support the other side.
All right. Now, the columnist in Independent on Sunday, John Rentoul, makes an interesting point this morning. He says, for you to win over Labour MPs, you have to decide what kind of party you are. They, the moderates, are social democrats. You are a self-confessed liberal. When it comes to things like civil disobedience and human rights and so forth, a lot of the people who agree with you are actually on the Corbyn side of the party. So what can you do to win over Labour MPs who you might need to kind of boost your chances in the next year or so? What's your offer to them?
First of all, we're not defining ourselves in terms of anybody else. We are liberals. We are people who believe in social justice. We believe in being economically credible, because you can't defend the National Health Service, have decent schools and have decent police services if your economy isn't growing properly. So that is a very clear position that we have, that it appears that Jeremy Corbyn and co have chosen to vacate. But to my mind, what you have in front of you in the last 5 months since the Conservatives went it alone in government and the Liberal Democrats left government, or indeed were ejected from government, we've had our housing association properties being sold off. We've seen human rights being got rid of through the Human Rights Act. We see your internet freedom being got rid of. We see tax credits being taken away, so people who work really hard on low incomes get their incomes cut. You see all the subsidies and support for our green industry across Britain creating, which has hundreds of thousands of people working in it being got rid of. Now that is in sad negativity,
I suppose,
but a proof of what the Liberal Democrats are for and have done. And so you now see, since May the 7th, all the reasons why the Liberal Democrats mattered so much. And it's the fear of the loss of those values in British politics that drove 20,000 people to join us, and millions of more I hope to support us in the future.
So do you change anything? Do you compromise on anything in order to lure over Labour MPs?
No, what we say is that in Britain you have a Conservative government that is lurching to extremes, that is hitting very hard-working people on low incomes, that is getting rid of British traditional liberties, that is toying with leaving the EU, which would destroy hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs in Britain and make Britain less relevant on the international stage.
Right, okay.
And that government needs... But Andrew, this is important. That government needs credibly opposing.
You
and
have
if the
8
official
MPs.
opposition
It's going to be
chooses
very
to
hard.
lurch into fantasy economics, then our job is to make sure that we provide that commitment to social justice and economic credibility.
You can't possibly be the opposition with 8 MPs way behind the SNP, way behind the Labour Party, can you?
I'm bound to observe that, you know, 5 months ago you wouldn't have expected us to be here with our membership increased by a third, or with us gaining more council seats than anybody else, or indeed with us in a position where people are talking about us with more seriousness than they've done for many years. And you mentioned the SNP there. You know, 6 months ago the SNP had just 6 MPs, and today Scotland is sadly something akin to a one-party state. So don't assume that our position now is a position we must remain. There is a vast space in British politics for a party that is socially just and economically credible, and we are determined to fill that space. The Tories must not be allowed to get away with doing the things they're doing without being credibly opposed.
Do you agree with Vince Cable there should be a new party on the centre-left? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, we've got the Liberal Democrats. Why would we create a new party?
So that's a no.
My sense is that there are. My sense is that there are liberals. There are liberals in other parties who are not yet Liberal Democrats. People in the Labour Party. Actually, there are many people in the Conservatives who think that David Cameron and George Osborne attacking low-income workers is a terrible thing to do. And think that risking Britain's relevance and prosperity by pulling us out of the European Union or taking that risk is a terrible thing to do. And I want to reach out to those people too.
One final question. A small story on the front pages this morning is that you want to ban ice cream vans because they're diesel engines. Is that true?
I read that. No. I mean,
ice creams are safe in a Liberal Democrat Britain, are they?
The way we make party policy is through conference. It's very democratic. The aim of that motion is well intentioned. It's about making sure that we reduce carbon emissions, but targeting idling ice cream vans is absolutely not on my agenda, and we shouldn't be doing it.
Mr. Whippy survives. Thank you very much indeed, Tim Farron.
Mr. Whippy is safe in my hands. Yes.
Good stuff. You were involved in the Transport Department for a long time. So I therefore have to ask you about Jeremy Corbyn's first big policy announcement, which is the line-by-line renationalisation of the railway system, which for a lot of people, we see from the polls, but also here, is very, very popular.
Well, we've got record numbers of passengers on our railways at the moment. We've got record investment going in. In fact, we've never had more investment. This is the biggest investment going on since the Victorians built the network. We're thinking ahead and bringing forward our plans on High Speed 2, so we've not just got the right capacity today, we've got the right capacity for the future. There's been far too long in Britain when our railways just didn't have the investment that they need.
So is your basic complaint about renationalisation that it wouldn't allow sufficient investment in for the next phase of the railway system?
I think it would waste millions, potentially billions of taxpayers' money on what is essentially from the Labour Party now an ideological joyride at a time when instead we should be getting on with the plan we've got in place for record investment to do the kind of capacity that commuters need, the sorts of improvements on the track, on the signalling that are vital to help people be able to get to work. And when we talk about Labour putting at risk our country's economic security and the family security in their finances, this is precisely what we mean. Having a railway network that has the right level of investment is hugely important for Britain's economy. It's massively important for constituents like my own who rely on the railways to be able to get to work. And that's why we should never let them get the keys of that car again.
Justin Greening, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a roller coaster week, as we've been hearing, for the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn said he'd do things differently, and he certainly proved that when it comes to clothes, media appearances, royal protocol, managing the party, he has a unique style But is this too disorganised, even chaotic? I'm joined now by one of the most senior members of his team, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Hilary Benn. Good morning to you, Hilary Benn.
Andrew, good morning.
Now, one of the really difficult questions for those of us looking from the outside is who is really in charge? Is it the Shadow Cabinet? Because the Shadow Cabinet is not overall, as it were, Corbynite. There's the leader of the party, there's the Shadow Chancellor, but not many others who are, as it were, Jeremy Corbyn's natural soulmates. Lots of other people inside the Shadow Cabinet. And you have a discussion on, for instance, the welfare cap. And then Jeremy Corbyn goes and says something different at the TUC. So who is in charge?
Well, Jeremy's just been elected with a very large mandate.
So he's in charge.
He's the leader of the party. He's appointed a big team. It's an inclusive team, and we've got a big task on our hands, which is to persuade the British people to support Labour when it comes to the next election. You were just talking about the railways a moment ago with Justine. As you said, it's a very popular policy because we need an integrated transport system. And, you know, you get on the train and people say, well, if you've got a ticket for a different train service, you can't use it here. Imagine Londoners getting on the London Underground, Piccadilly line, and the announcement says, if you've got a ticket for the Victoria or the District line, it's not valid here. The fact is, I travel regularly on East Coast. For 5 years, it was directly run and it returned money to the Treasury. And the ideology was the government saying, no, that company cannot continue. Foreign-owned, state-owned railway companies can bid.
Yes.
But we can't continue to have a publicly run one. It's common sense and it'll be good for passengers.
I'm still interested, beyond that, in exactly how policy is going to be made in the Labour Party going forward, because both Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have been pretty frank and clear about wanting to bring in that great movement, those £3 voters, the 250,000 people who voted for Jeremy, coming in and actually making policy as part of the party conference. More power to the local parties, more power to the activists, less power to the MPs, less power to the Shadow Cabinet. John McDonnell said yesterday that MPs are going to be shocked by what's going to happen.
Well, with the Labour Party, we're a broad church, and in our lifeblood is debate and discussion. And in the end, Party Conference, the National Policy Forum, will decide how policy is going to evolve. Currently, we all stood on a manifesto at the last general election, and that remains the policy of the party. But look, we should welcome a debate, because one of the reasons that Jeremy won is that a lot of people said, can we open up politics? All parties are coalitions of view, as you will know very well,
certainly
Andrew.
are, yeah.
And what is refreshing about Jeremy is he says, well, I welcome that. I acknowledge that. Instead of everybody pretending, when a new leader is elected, well, we've all changed our minds about what we think. You have a debate and a discussion, and that is a good thing.
Absolutely, but one of the things that's clear about this is that the party's manifesto of the last election is very different to the mandate that Jeremy Corbyn won in his leadership election. So if you look at something like Trident, very, very large numbers of the people who supported Jeremy Corbyn, like lots of people who voted yes in the Scottish referendum, are determined that Trident must go. What's your view?
My view is that we need to maintain an independent nuclear deterrent. I share with Jeremy the wish to see a world that is free of nuclear weapons. But I don't believe for 1 second if Britain were to give up its deterrent, any other of the nuclear states would give theirs up. And secondly, Andrew, the truth is we live in a differently dangerous world now, and we need a continuous at-sea deterrent. We need to do it in the most cost-effective way, and that is the view which the Labour Party, including the Labour Party conference, has taken for many years now.
So this is why I was banging on about who's in charge, who takes the view, because there is, as it were, the Jeremy Corbyn view and the Corbyn movement view, and there is the Hilary Benn view. And my question, a lot of people are going to want to know what's going to happen, who is going to win in that tussle, because it's massively important. It must be a red line for you, I assume.
Well, of course it's important, because it's about the security of the nation.
Exactly.
Now, the Labour Party conference in the end will take a decision, but consistently for many years, the view has been we should maintain that independent nuclear deterrent, but there'll be a debate, and Jeremy is encouraging that.
If the Labour Party votes to get rid of Trident and to leave NATO, could you serve in the Shadow Cabinet?
I don't think that is going to happen. And can I just say...
60% of your party voted for Jeremy Corbyn on that manifesto.
But we've been members of NATO, as you will know, since it was created, in part with the support of the Labour government at the end of the Second World War that created the NHS, and Ernie Bevin was the Foreign Secretary that helped make it happen, and it has been a cornerstone of our security, and I simply don't see that happening.
But this great movement that Jeremy galvanised up and down the country, which brought him into the Labour leadership, takes a radically different point of view, and they will be mortified and quite angry to hear you saying that. In the end, there is going to have to be one heck of an argument inside the Labour Party over policies like Trident, renationalisation, taxes, NATO and all the rest of it.
Well, I don't think anybody should be mortified or angry about an honest and open debate about what the right thing to do is. And when it comes to national security, the first responsibility of government and indeed of the opposition, and we are working together to be a strong and effective opposition to the government, is to defend the nation, but to hold the government to account. And we've done that this week in opposing the trade union bill and the tax credit changes. You know, when over 8 million people discover next April that this government is cutting their income, they go to work and they're being penalised, they're going to be very angry about that.
Meanwhile, Russian tanks are rolling through eastern Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's putting jets into Syria to help Assad as well. Do you think this is the result of NATO provocation?
No, I don't. I don't think that is the case. But I am, of course, extremely concerned about the situation.
Jeremy Corbyn does think that.
Well, I'm extremely concerned about the situation in Syria, because our first priority must be, as an international community, to strain every sinew to try and bring an end to the appalling conflict there, the barrel bombs that President Assad is dropping on his own people, and the sheer brutality of ISIL Daesh that is killing people because they're supposedly of the wrong religion, throwing gay people off buildings, selling women in markets. And the question we will have to consider is, what is the most effective thing to do to deal with that?
In the House of Commons quite soon, and airstrikes are likely to be proposed by the government. What's your position going to be on that?
We've said consistently, if the government has a proposition, we need to look at what it is. What is the target, the objective? What is the legal base? What is the view of nations in the region, including the government of Iraq? But I think what we've learned...
And if they can answer those questions to your satisfaction, would you vote for airstrikes?
I was just going to go on to say that if the refugee crisis that we have been witnessing on our television screens this summer teaches us anything, is that you need to have a broad approach to deal with this. And I would add to the list of things that the government must consider and bring before the House of Commons is getting more humanitarian aid in. Britain is doing a great job, but part of the reason that people are leaving Turkey and Lebanon and Jordan is because the rations are being cut. Their children aren't in school and they see no hope, no future. Can we do anything about safe zones within Syria? And crucially, a major international political effort bringing in the Saudis, the Iranians, the Russians, the Americans and Europe to try and find a political settlement, because that is the only way we're going to deal with the refugee crisis, Andrew.
Are you relieved that Jeremy Corbyn has given up his leadership of the Stop the War coalition?
Well, Jeremy's taken that decision, and because he's got other big responsibilities.
Sure. I'm just asking for your response to it.
That is a decision for Jeremy to make, and he's decided that.
The Stop the War coalition started really because of the Iraq war, and you once said that having voted for the Iraq war, you could look people in the eye and say that was the right decision and you stand by it. Do you still say that?
It was the right decision to take at the time, given what we knew then. Clearly, had we known...
Looking back, there are huge numbers of people killed since.
No, but looking back, if we had known then that there were no weapons of mass destruction, but it was believed at the time there were, why do you think the weapons inspectors were there? Indeed, we know that some of his generals believed they were there, and he certainly wanted to create that impression with his neighbours. Clearly, Parliament wouldn't have voted to take that decision.
And yet you have to be judged by the effects of decisions that you take. Jeremy Corbyn is apparently going to apologise on behalf of the Labour Party for that war. Would you like to apologise for that war?
We got it wrong because there were no weapons of mass destruction, and that is clearly the case. But what Iraq has now is a fragile democracy. Clearly,
Iraq has a civil war, massacre, so-called Islamic State.
And you know what the reason why is? Because this was a country that had been brutally oppressed by Saddam over many years, and the lid came off. And the majority Shia, who had been oppressed by the minority Sunni, said, well, we're going to change things. And that is difficult. But we were absolutely right a year ago to respond to the request from Haider al-Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, to assist him in trying to deal with ISIL Daesh, who are, of course, invading and have occupied parts of Iraq.
So if Jeremy Corbyn apologises for that war, he won't be apologising on behalf of his shadow foreign secretary?
I've said that clearly we got it wrong, and we should be sorry about that, because there were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay.
But you can only take a decision, Andrew, on the basis of what you know to be the case or believe to be the case at the time.
Let me hop to yet another issue, which is there has clearly been quite a change of policy or a change of heart over Labour's attitude in a European referendum, that you are now committed completely as a party to campaign for yes, even if David Cameron gets what you would regard as a party as a kind of bankers' Europe and strips out some of the social protection. How did that come about? What happened?
Well, that has always been our policy, and actually it's always been Jeremy's view, because, as you all know, he said during his election campaign, I'm not for walking away, I'm for staying in. Now, what has been discussed this week is how should we react if David Cameron were unwise enough to try and weaken worker protection in Europe, which of course has given us paid holiday, better rights for agency workers, improved maternity and paternity leave. The right thing to do is not to leave the European Union. The right thing is to commit to change that, and the best way you can achieve that is by electing a Labour government in 2020. Britain benefits in terms of jobs and security and influence by being part of the European Union.
Plenty of your colleagues are highly sceptical about the monarchy in this country. Do you think Labour MPs should be obliged to sing the national anthem on major occasions like the RAF one last week?
I think it's the wise thing to do, but it's for individuals to make the choice. That's what freedom's about.
Right. Hilary Benn, for now, thank you very much indeed.
I've been getting away with it all my